Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Angel Dust, Charlie and Vaggie. Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. So you're telling me that you're all demons? The question itself was asked and rang with an awkward sound as his voice almost seemed to echo a bit in the open space of the dining room. While wanting to sound off meek at the presence of otherworldly creatures, his tone of voice was masked by the sound of the hotel's guests speaking over each other while adjusting themselves in preparation for the food to be served. It wasn't helped either as he was currently situated between the white spider and one-eyed Cyclops. Both were their best in getting a reaction out of the blonde by flirting with him. To say it didn't have an effect on him was an understatement. The only other person in the room sitting by himself was Husk, who was keeping quiet with his head laying down on the table and a drink at hand, clearly not all too keen in wanting to strike up a conversation. The only ones missing were that of Nifty and Alastor, but whose current whereabouts were made up by the constant noise hailing from the kitchen. Apparently, the Crimson Deer was helping the maid in making a family recipe. Not demons, per se, but sinners, the princess said as she helped with the arrangements of the silverware, alongside her girlfriend who herself was setting up the plates and trying to keep both Cherry and Angel from bothering the human too much. Sinners? Now sporting a perplexed look over the term used. What will be the difference between the two if they all living in hell? Demons are natural natives, while sinners who were once human before dying and are sent here as a punishment of the sins they committed, all while placing the last of the silver down and sitting at the center of the table, and was soon followed by her second in command. Though sometimes the term itself is used to group pretty much everyone living in hell together. So, I get why it would a bit confusing to tell the difference. And you're a natural born demon. Yep, and not just a native of hell, but also the daughter of Lucifer and heir to the throne. Eyes widening over the realization of having to find himself in a conversation with the future ruler of hell, but made sure to keep his emotions in check to avoid sounding too surprised. Sorry for speaking too bluntly, your highness, not one to ever be used to talking to someone of higher status without sounding like a complete idiot. Having a flustered look on her face, Charlie couldn't help himself in waving her hands in the air and laughing nervously at the same time. You don't need to be too formal. Never having liked being associated too much with her royal roots and instead choosing to be treated like a regular person. You don't have to call me that, you can just call me Charlie if you want. I've never really enjoyed using such titles. Well, if you insist. Those present couldn't help but stifle a smirk over how the heiress was acting. Not even Vaggie could not hold back a small smile from forming over Charlie's sudden expression. Any further words had to be put on hold once the noise of a cart filled with food soon came clattering through the revolving doors of the kitchen, and the voice of an energetic maid quickly sounded off throughout the dining room, as well as the radio demon coming from the back with a quick in his step. Food's ready, everyone. It didn't take long for Nifty to have everyone's plates filled with the delicious scent of soup. The smell itself proved to be enough to cure Husk of his apparent hangover as he quickly shot right back up ready to partake in the meal. Now with everyone's plates being filled, it was time for everyone to be seated and be filled in as to the reason for a human being here in hell with the rest of them. The one to pose such a delicate question was everyone's favorite alcoholic anthropomorphic cat. I'm just gonna say it before it gets dragged out for too long, how the beep are you down here? Never being the one to beat around the bush either, Angel also chimed in and threw in his 2 cents. I was just about to ask you the same thing, Whiskers. How did you end up here? Not that I'm complaining, having someone normal looking is a nice change of pace than having to sleep with some of the Harlequin freaks down here. Yeah, how did you get here? Did you blow your way into hell? Cherry quipped while digging into her food. Then please talk with your mouth not full and you use the right spoon, you're spilling all over the tablecloth. Bite me, bitch. Why are you even still here? You're not even a guest. I'm a +1. More like a bottom feeder looking for a free meal. Now ladies, now is not the time for fighting, now is the time to enjoy each other's company and to greet our very special friend to our humble abode, the dear demon said while sitting next to Husk, flanked by Nifty who sat on the left of him. It would be in poor taste if we let such a fine meal be spoiled from needless conflict. This immediately got both female demons to quiet down, mostly on the part of being intimidated by the overlord, but it still didn't stop them from glaring at each other silently. Alastor then set his sights on the blonde who at this point was able to make both demons sitting on opposite sides of him stop with their teasing. But just like my dear feline friend said, but less crude, having his hands placed underneath him in comfortable fashion. How exactly did you manage to get here? A bit taken back on such an intense stare leveled at him by the red fiend, his eyes grew a bit heavy on being asked to remember the circumstances of his surprise awakening in this plane. The change of his demeanor was not lost on any of the other sinners who could feel a wave of sadness emitting from the human. Are you okay? The question was asked by Charlie to her human guest, who seemed to be at a loss of words, as if he seemed to have lost the ability to speak. His sudden pause, after being asked the question, made him shudder of having to relive a painful experience, but knew he had to tell them as a means of revealing how he got here. Slowly letting out a shuddering breath, he compassed himself the best he could and began to tell his side of the story. Well, like how I said before, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I am a ninja from the hidden leaf village of Konohagakure. To say what he had to share with the entire group in being shocking would have been the understatement of the century, as all those in the room all experienced a series of wavering emotions through their facial expressions as the blonde let out a long tale on what led him to have dinner in the company of devils. The amazement on what type of world he described being from. Skepticism on some of the outlandish claims he made about what he could do. Sadness is what he went through, especially from the loss he had recently suffered. The duration of his story was told throughout the meal and must have been an interesting affair, as many of the demons in attendance were glued intensely on what he had to say. They would then move their party to the recreational room, which was well lit by the fireplace that invoked a comforting sensation. Of course, once he was done recounting his story about his exploits on the moon, it was understandable that he would be greeted with absolute silence, as everyone stood with wide eyes on such a tale of grand proportions. As soon as the moment passed though, some of the more vocal members of the hotel soon made their opinions heard. That is absolute bullshit. You must be one hell of a badass to kick some major ass up in space. I've been high as a kite before and heard some pretty crazy shit, but that takes the cake. Even though I hate to admit it, I agree with Angel on this, we may be in hell, but even I know when such a story could be too far-fetched to believe. So cool, you were on the moon. You don't actually believe his story, do you, Nifty? Why not? It's not like he was lying. How the hell can you tell? What would I even gain from lying? He told the feline across from him. And even if I was, what would I even be able to do with how hurt I am at the moment? You'll all probably be able to gang up on me with not much of a fight from me. You into the heavy stuff? Because I know a thing or two from being ganged up on, fluttering his eyes at the human. I wasn't talking about that type of ganging up, not even wanting to get into what he just said. We can make it mean both ways. Angel, please. Not at the table, the angel stated with an angry stare aimed at the spider. No sex talk when we're eating. You're the one bringing up sex. I'm just making simple beeping conversation here, he fired back. Besides, I wasn't brining up sex until you brought it up. So get your head out of the gutter. Got you there, little Miss Princess Pants. Beep off, Cherry. Charlie on her part still kept silent as the rest made their utter disbelief known of having heard someone admitting to being from another world filled with powerful individuals. If she were anyone else instead of being the offspring of the ruler of hell, she would also claim it to be nonsense, but being over 200 years old, she's learned to accept some of the weirder aspects of her life. I believe you. Surprised by such a declaration from her girlfriend, Vaggie once acted as the voice of reason once more in order to make some sense of the situation. You're not seriously considering his story to be true, do you? True or not, you have to tell yourself that since the moment he arrived nothing has made much sense, this said while holding her hand to count the many strange occurrences that have transpired. Heaven glowing intensely, along with the rest of the stars in the sky, followed by a blinding light, and then him being found in the middle of a crater injured but still managed to live. She then looked at Naruto. No offense. None taken, been through much worse. I bet you have. Keeping to himself throughout much of what the blonde had to say regarding his homeworld and his sudden appearance, Alastor decided to see what the human was capable of if what he said was true. So if what you say is nothing but the truth, then a demonstration should be in order to see what type of abilities you claim to possess. Eyes shining brightly for a brief moment at the thought of powerful humans fighting against him. Charlie, on the other hand, would not tolerate a fight breaking out, especially from a person clearly still recovering from his injuries, to strain himself too much. Now wait for just a second. Quickly getting near the ninja and placing a hand on his shoulder. He is by no means fully healed yet to be putting too much strain on his body, and I won't have any form of violence be permitted on this premises. The tone of her voice was filled with an unwavering command and eyes set to stone on her wishes. I meant for no quarrel, just a demonstration on what skills he may have to support his claims of being from another plane of existence, while waving his hand in a dismissive manner. Nothing too strenuous, mind you. Still though. It's alright, he said while sitting further back on the leather couch. I'm starting to feel a whole lot better, not 100%, but better than when I woke up. Seeing that her fellow blonde was okay with the proposition, she felt her nerves lessen a bit from having to worry about his health. But that still didn't mean that it settled well for her inside over the possibility of him getting hurt or someone getting in the crossfire. Maybe even trying to prevent property damage to the building. Place was old enough as it was, and any impactful force could have it toppling down over their heads. She hadn't yet paid the deposit on the insurance yet. But seeing Naruto's expression and telling her that everything would be fine, Charlie couldn't do much but to relent at his request. If you're comfortable with the idea, then I guess it's fine, still retaining some doubt in her tone. But just make sure not go too overboard with whatever you're going to do. I promise. Not wanting to miss out on the chance to see what the ninja could do, both troublemakers were anxious at the prospects of seeing something exciting. What are we still waiting for? Let's get this show on the road. I want to see what handsome hair can do. Do you think he has something strong enough to make some big damage? I don't know, Cherry, but at least it won't be boring. Seeing the two lost in their own little world over the thought of what the human could do made Vaggie rub her temples in preparation for a headache waiting to happen. Could you two please act civil enough and not get too rowdy? We still don't know if what he said is true, for all we know he may not even be telling us the truth. I've been nothing but honestly since I started talking about how I got here, starting to get defensive of being called out a liar, especially with the loss of a dear friend. Looking at him straight in the eye, Vaggie could say that he held no sort of animosity to his words, but she's always relied on her instincts to read people for a large chunk of her life. Knowing how to spot out people with bad intentions had become second nature even before she died. Look. I'm not trying to be the bad guy here, but you gotta understand there are a bunch of sinners here in hell who all had their own reasons to lie and deceive those sustainable to deceit. It's not far-fetched to believe that you may have ulterior motives or at the least very unlucky to have found your way down here. Either way, I can't just ignore the chances of a possible danger. I understand that you may not trust me, and I really don't expect the rest of you either, this said with the utmost conviction in his voice and sincerity in his eyes. But I will never admit something that I didn't mean, so you don't ever have to worry about me being a threat to anyone. Vaggie stared at him for a moment before making up her mind about asking any more questions. Okay. I'll take your word for it, just don't make me regret it. Thank you, smiling of having her give him the benefit of the doubt. That's all I am asking for. Just a chance to gain your trust. Oh, for beep's sake, a goddamn Boy Scout. The voice itself from the other side of the pool table and was none other than the large cat holding a flask on hand. Are you going to show us what you can do or not? Already done with his food and once more taking another swing of his drink. Because I'm starting to get even more bored in having to hear this little back and forth on who can you suck up to. Boom. The sudden explosion of smoke that bellowed out from where the blonde was sitting caught everyone by surprise as to what happened, but if the appearance of a random cloud of smoke was surprising, then what was shown after it disappeared shocked them even more. What sat on the chair instead of the well-dressed blonde was instead that of the foul-taking cat who stood up with a grin on his face stretching from ear to ear. To say that Husk was surprised would be cutting it short. What? The? Foo. Beep was what the double of Husk said, now standing in front of the original, whose shocked face was clearly evident to the point of dropping his flask on the floor. There's two Huskers now. Nifty always states the obvious. No shit. Well. Bringing his fur-covered hand under his chin. Pretty spot on, don't you think? I'll say, Angel coming to the double's side and touching his shoulder. Feels like the real thing. Not stopping there, Angel continued to probe the doppelganger with all four of his hands. That was until he copped a feel on the crotch. The expression on the copy of Husk was priceless, even more so with the original, as both had a stifled reaction of being touched below the belt. It didn't help that it wasn't a simple grope, but a very sensual one, as by the feel of it, Angel knew exactly what he was doing with them in his grip. Hey. Trying hard not to let out steam from his ears of being groped again. Get your hand off my beep. Snarling at the spider by pushing him away from his duplicate. And you cut that shit out and turn back. Smoke. Sorry, still red in the face from the act that just transpired and getting even more red in hearing both Angel and Cherry laugh at his reaction. The next thing he knew, he felt both Cherry and Nifty come up to him with excited looks on their faces. Already knowing what they wanted out of him. Am I next? I want one too. Smiling at the sight of the two female Cyclops acting happy at the thought of seeing a copy of themselves, he couldn't help but oblige at their requests. Smoke. What stood now in the place of the fake Husk was an exact copy of Cherry. Holy shit, looking over her clone as if it were a mirror. Man, I know I said it before, but damn I look good, she stated in total admiration of seeing herself. You know it, the likeness of her voice said back to her with a wink. Smoke. The next burst of smoke revealed the short stature of Nifty. Hi. Came the undisputed high-pitched voice of the maid and waving her small gloved hand at the original. Hi. Doing the same action with the same motion as the copy that it almost looked as though it was coming from a reflection of a mirror. At this point, both Charlie and Vaggie saw the scene happening in front of them to be a bit too surreal, of having doubles of their own members in the flesh acting eerily, similar as if they were real. Though for Charlotte it was more on the likes of wonderment on what other techniques he could do. The next thing they knew was said blonde walking slowly to the nearest wall and slightly raising his left foot upwards until it came into contact with the wallpaper. The weird choice of movement was strange to the rest but decided not to talk and instead keep silent. The blonde then placed his right foot against the wall and began to walk sideways as if he were still walking on the floor. He stopped once he reached the ceiling and looked downwards at the rest and cheerfully waving at them. Of course, being one to be kind to new friends, Nifty waved back. And now he's walking up the walls, Vaggie muttered under her breath. Looking at the blonde move around the ceiling with Kiki following him up and floating around him in a playful manner. Looks like Kiki has taken quite the liking to him. That's good. Normally she's really picky on who she lets get near her. Both her and Charlie watched next as with a simple flip downwards, Naruto landed next to Husk. Though he stumbled in his step and had to grab on the railing of the pool table to prevent himself from falling forward. The slight bit of pain slowly traveled up his legs due to the landing. Shouldn't overwork my body too much right now, he thought to himself as he didn't want anyone to worry about his condition, even though he felt a feeling of concern coming from some of the devils. Seeing this almost made Husk ask if he was okay, but was interrupted by the radio demon coming up to Naruto. As much fun as it is to mimic the looks of others and walking up walls, what other tricks to have up your sleeve? Placing a heavy emphasis on the other. Turning back to his original look and looking a tad bit sheepish in what else he could display. Well, what I just did is just the lesser forms of techniques I'm able to do with my chakra, as well as the same with some of the bigger types of jutsus at my disposal. Chakra? Jutsu tilting his head to the side at hearing such a strange term. Such strange terms. Charlie picked up on the word, quickly acknowledged what it meant given her age and experience in multiple languages. That means either skill or technique, right? Yeah, that's right, surprised at the quickness of the princess in being able to understand the term. How did you know that? Well, the term itself is not uncommon, it's different to what it means here, she stated while walking up to him. Is a term most commonly found in Asian countries, primarily in Japan. Japan is an island country located in the Pacific. I would have assumed that you were Japanese as well giving the name, but refrained from asking you to give that you don't look. Look like what? Confused about how the princess was acting all of a sudden. She means Asian, thankfully Vaggie saved her the embarrassment of having to admit it. How would that matter in how I look? It's just that most people of Asian descent don't have the features that you have. Getting confused by the second in what she was trying to say. Which would be. I really don't know how to begin to describe it, laughing nervously at how to even start to answer his question. Before looking at the others for some help. Vaggie looked away with arms crossed as even she didn't even want to be the one to go there. Husk looked at his bottle as if it were the most interesting thing. Alastor just stood there smiling like always, but for some reason it felt like it was primarily aimed at her discomfort. Nifty was just being nifty. Didn't help that she was jumping up and down with her hand raised. Oh, let me answer. Hey Nifty. I think I see some roaches behind the bar. What? I thought I cleaned it here, sparing not time to run towards to the bar. Thanks Vaggie. Don't mention it. Heading back to the question and the confused shinobi. Charlie cleared her throat to reply back. Only to be beaten to the punch by Angel. What she means, doll, is that you're not slanted-eyed or short round, once more getting up close and personal. Pardon me? Putting his hand on his sides while taking a cigarette out of his left pocket and lighting it up with a flick of his finger. Not trying to be mean or anything, but last time I checked most people who are Asian don't have blonde hair and blue eyes. Hell, let alone whiskers on their cheeks. All while puffing out a ring of smoke in the shape of a heart in his direction. I really don't know what to say about that, confused at the remarks leveled at him. But for the longest time, I've always had this type of feature. I personally don't find it all that strange. To tell you the truth, I've known others who had different shade of colors more distinctive than mine. Really? Yeah, I've seen those with silver, orange, pink, purple, and green hair. Never thought of it as strange, just a part of how people were born with. And you never thought of it as being peculiar. Never cared much about how people looked, shrugging his shoulders on the comment. I would rather judge what's on the inside than just by their looks alone. Surprised at the response of the blonde, Charlie felt happy about how he perceived people. Though she did wonder if the same applied to understanding the language too. The princess didn't have to ponder much of the subject as Nifty came up to the human with the same thought in mind. Anata wa itsuti ire kodo nai teru kodo ga diki masu ka. Yeah, I can understand you confused at such a strange request from the maid. Angel, being who he was, took no time to respond kindly to the different language that was just spoken. The beep did you just say? That was Japanese, you stupid mook, said Husk, still being the kind of drunk with no filter to his opinions. At the very least we can infer that he can understand the damn language. I'm so lost right now, bemoaned the sage. That's all fine and dandy, but can you please get back on track, Alastor said with his ever-present cheerful voice, but if one were to listen closely, they would have pointed out a hint of annoyance laced in his tone. The sentiment was shared with the ever-exciting trio consisting of Angel, Cherry, and Nifty, wanting to see what else the ninja had in store. Yeah, what else you got? Cherry said, while laying back on the couch in the center of the room, she was joined by her best friend anticipating the next display. Can you do something like a huge explosion or breathing fire? Oh. What about running at the speed of light? All said with the widest grin plastered all over her face. The same could be said about Nifty who came back from inspecting the bar, but tenfold as she was practically jumping on her heels waiting for what was to come. Well, I guess I can show you guys one more thing, smiling at the enthusiast faces from the two. This was also extended to the rest, even if they weren't showing it like Husk or Vaggie. But after this one I'm done for today. Yay. Okay, but make sure no one gets too close as it is really dangerous to touch, warning them with a dead-set tone and serious eyes. So make sure not to come near once it fully forms. Seeing that everyone had either nodded or silently agreed towards his warning, everyone just waited for what he had to show them as part of a final trick. A few of them even waited with bated breath. Okay, here goes, he quietly muttered as he stretched out his hand. With the opening of his palm did it start to appear as by command. The rest were instantly glued to his open palm. At first nothing seemed to happen as the room's quiet atmosphere was almost to the point of hearing the creaks and moans of old fishers of the hotel. But before anyone could comment on the lack of display did it finally start to show. The first that was noticeable was how the hair around the open hand seemed to start to get sucked in, but not to the point of disappearing, but instead start to swirl with one another in rapid motion. The hum of the air was quickly followed by a blue color, replacing the colorless rotating air, and by the moment became even deeper in its shade, the more it continued to spin. On was the low hum of air being sucked in, now it grew to sounding as though a miniature storm had been created right in front of them. Before that receded, leaving a perfectly shaped round object constantly swirling in the center of his hand. This is what I call a Rasengan. Oh, pretty. Nifty ever the bold one said as she got real close to the spiraling vortex. What does it do? Reaching out with a sharp finger to touch the constructive chakra. Careful. Don't get too close to it, moving it away from her grasp. But I want to touch it, her pout replaced the excited look on her face in a quick instant. Not this, you can't. Let me. No. Moving around to avoid having her touch it as she was very adamant in doing so with all that hand grabbing she was trying to do. Though given the height difference between the two, it wasn't hard not to keep it away. Her grabbing other parts of him was where he was having some trouble with. Stop touching me there. Nifs, I think that's enough sexual harassment for one day, Vaggie told her as she grabbed onto the short maid and pulled her away before she actually hurt herself. Just one more touch. Doesn't seem much to me. Cherry was next to input as she got close to the construct, but not to the point of getting close to a physical touch, well flanked by her friend next to her as they got a closer look. Whatcha think, Angel? Doesn't seem much to me. Seeing the air around continue to spin. Feels like more like a fan to me. Fan? This is a dangerous technique that could level this entire building. Oh, I want to see that. Nope. No damage to the building. Charlie came into the conversation as she will not hear about having nothing too dangerous and going off inside the hotel. I think we're good enough with what Naruto has shown us so far. Come on, live a little, Angel groaned out with how prissy the princess was being. The place is already a dump as it is, not a couple more broken rooms is going to make much of a difference. Not when we're trying to run a business, is not. Total buzzkill. While the two were going on with their back and forth on the topic, Husk was still where he was looking as the sphere of intense air continued to swirl. Feeling Alastor's presence next to him shift since the blonde did his little power trick. You sure are quite there, Al tossing the bottle that he was nursing and throwing it to the side. Thought you'll be a bit more excited for the display given that it was your idea. Who's to say I'm not? Not even bothering to look at the former overlord and instead focusing on the energy that seemed to emit from the literal palm of the human. Doesn't really look like it. Ever the perceptive one, Husk. And that's why I do enjoy our little chats. PFT. Yeah, right. While that was going on, Naruto was starting to feel the effects of having shown a bit too much given how exhausted he was currently. A bit of intense tiredness was starting to form. Wish I could continue, but I am starting to feel a bit under the weather and I would really like it if I can return back to my room to rest up a bit. Dispelling the Rasengan with a quick motion. But also taken in some of their disappointed faces at that. More so Cherry, Angel, and even more Nifty. Oh, already. Don't worry about it. Looking at the little lady who was being held by Vagion's I fully healed up, I'll promise to make it up for you guys, giving her his trademark grin. Nifty on her part couldn't help but blush at seeing such a pure soul. Something that was a rare commodity in hell for obvious reasons. The act of keeping a promise meant everything for Nifty, as she was the type of person desperately wanting to form bonds with the people she met. Looking into his blue hues, she saw nothing but honesty and not the usual deceit that she had become used to since the moment of her fall from grace. "I'll hold you to your word then. I always do. The day that I don't own up to my promises is the day that I stop being myself," a proclamation further cemented by the radiance he gave off with his sunny demeanor. Husk did not even try to conceal his eyes from rolling to the side of his head from hearing this bubblegum crap. Beeping romantics. Seeing this as his cue to leave, Charlie came along to lead him away. "I'll help guide you back to your room, not wasting a moment in providing assistance. Vaggie, I won't be long until I come back. In the meantime, can you help bring up Nifty and Husk up to speed on how we operate here at the hotel?" she told her girlfriend as she began to walk the blonde upstairs. "Sure, no problem," waving back at her with a slight reservation of being left alone with their new visitor, but calmed down in remembering the shinobi's words before turning her attention to her new co-workers. Alastor all but kept quiet as he saw the blonde leave with a demon bell deep in furrow as he continued to ponder over what the human was capable of and to what extent did his power reach. Being in the same boat as Nifty and being a bit despondent of having the entertainment being cut short, it was soon time for the punk rocker to make her exit as well. "Well, I guess that's all the fun we're gonna have for tonight," getting up from the couch and stretching a few kinks from her joints. "I should probably start heading back to my crib. I don't want anyone trying to take over the place while I'm gone." "Yeah, I am starting to feel drowsy myself," he told her while yawning, rubbing his left eye. "Just be careful when you head back, you know the type of people that come out at night." I know," shrugging her shoulders but smiling at his concern over her well-being. "Remember to pay me a visit, it's not much fun tearing the city a new one all by yourself. Also, don't forget to bring the blonde with you, I bet with him around we'll be sure to have plenty more fun." Smirking at the thought of what the three could do and the type of fun they'll have made him excited at the prospect. Though for now, all he wanted to do was hit the sack. "Yeah, me too. Well, I'll see you later, Cher. Night, Angel." And with a wave of his gloved hand at the rebel, Cherry had officially left the building. Soon followed by Angel walking out of the recreation room and back under the covers of his bed. Thus, leaving the only other sinner cloaked in red to his own machinations. Alastor all but kept quiet as he saw the blonde leave with a demon bell deep in furrow as he continued to ponder over what the human was capable of and to what extent did his power reach. "I'll try harder next time." Finally reaching his room, after a bit of walking up a few flights of stairs, both humans and demons stood outside his door. "I need to finally get around to fixing that elevator. Can't have everyone be taking the stairs all the time," laughing sheepishly over the small issue. The building itself still has a long list of repairs that needs to be looked at for the building to be fully functional. "I don't mind the walk at all. But if you want, I can try to help with as much as I can during the time that I am here." "Yeah, I've been meaning to ask you about that. I may not have the ability right now to send you back to where you are from, but I'll try to see what I can do. The last thing I want is my father knowing that a human was sent here to hell. Would me being here be that much of a problem?" "I'll be nothing short but sheer catastrophe. If word were to get out that a living soul was sent here, there would be major strife between heaven and hell." Contemplating her words carefully, he chose to relieve her worries. "Then, I guess I'm not too much of a hurry to head back." "Are you sure you're not worried about your loved ones back home?" Surprised at how calmly he took the news of not being able to return soon. "Don't get me wrong. I'm a bit sad that I won't be able to get back, but I also know that my friends are strong enough to manage without me." Placing a hand on her shoulder as an assurance that he was okay with his current predicament. Alright, then, feeling better in how he was reacting to the situation. But at the same time wanted to ask him about his earlier remark. "Did you mean what you said earlier?" "About what?" "That is possible to change people for the better, no matter how bad they are," hoping that he meant what he said. "I meant every word of it. No matter who it may be and what they have done, there's always a chance of finding some good deep inside." Relief at his response, it helped to reinforce Charlie's belief in helping those in need of redemption. "Thank you. I really needed to hear that." "No problem." Before he could enter his room, Charlie once more got his attention. "I know this may be a bit late, but as a proud member of the family of House Morningstar, I hereby accept your admittance of this inn and wish for your safe and comfortable stay here at the Happy Hotel," she stated with the biggest smile that even outshined his own. Naruto smiled, truly glad to have met such a kindred spirit and how helpful she's been in making sure he was okay. Truly ironic in having met such a loving demon here of all places. "Good night, Charlie." "Good night, Naruto." With that said and done, both went their separate ways back to their own respective dwellings, both content in having met each other. Though unknown to either of them, their meeting would mark the beginning of a grander scheme set in motion that would come to decide the fates of two worlds. To say that his life has taken a sudden turn for the unexpected could not have been understated by anyone other than the young sage. His current status as Pentagram City's sole living human resident was still under the adjustment phase, although given the state of the environment around him, any sort of progress could be very well described as its own sort of victory. Betting each day without having to incur the wrath of a legion of demons wanting to get a piece of him or use him as a potential means of escape from this inferno was fine by him. This, alongside living in hell for over a month, now gave Naruto plenty of time to recuperate back to health and familiarize himself with his new surroundings. Though he had to give equal thanks to the combined efforts of Charlie, Vaggie, and Nifty for making sure he felt comfortable in being confined at the hotel. Having already settled comfortably at the hotel and gotten used to his new acquaintances, albeit with some slight reservations, especially with a certain red deer, everything else went as smoothly as possible. Getting up from bed every morning, or at the very least he assumed it was morning given the red sky outside, never truly indicating what type of day it was unless you check the time on the clock. He just woke up around the same time that Nifty herself started to clean the hotel. This gave the sage a head start on the rest to get his bearings together and start to train his body to fully recover. Even without Kuruma to speed the process of his healing factor, thanks to his family ancestral genes, he was still able to heal at a faster rate than most humans. One of the methods which helped to get his body back on track was a healthy dose of an exercise regime that did wonders in not only helping him get better but keep his physique in top shape. He thanked Charlie for having fitted the inn with a fully functional workout center, filled with everything an Olympic athlete would ever need to use on the 6th floor. It was the perfect place for him to get back to his prime and prevent himself from becoming too lenient on his overall health. In Charlie's own words, one of the steps to self-healing not only begins within oneself, but also within their own body to help maintain the purity of the soul. A statement that he fully agreed with himself, especially from personal experience. This in itself also meant that the blonde was at times the only sole person to be seen using the equipment, as the rest with Vaggie and Charlie as the exceptions didn't really care much about working out. As some saw it as a pointless venture given that they were immune to many health factors that would typically be lethal to most living creatures. Meaning that one could be at the worst possible state health that could be achieved and not die as a result. Other times it could also mean being able to drink, smoke, and have as many dangerous vices that a sinner could get their hands to enjoy to the fullest without that severe of consequences to their overall being. An aspect of sinner biology that was aimed purely towards the physical aspect of their bodies. With the mental aspect being an entirely different story altogether. Case in point, having addictions that severely cloud or just plainly poison the mind. That was something that could be hard to reverse if done to the extreme. But that one itself varied according to Charlie, as sinners and other native hellborns contained different constitution to their bodies. So, it could greatly vary from person to person. For Naruto, he could see it plain as day from the people living at the hotel. Case in point, Husker. The choice was obvious, the latter, as he once saw Husk consume large amounts of alcohol that would have definitely killed the most hardened drinkers 10 times over. It made the man drunk and passed out on numerous occasions, but sooner or later he would just get up from wherever spot he fell down on and resume to drink the day away with the stock of booze that filled the cabinets. This did not mean that he wasn't visited from time to time, either when he was in his room relaxing or during his daily exercising. The visitation themselves mostly consisted of Charlie checking up on him to see if he was doing well, Vaggie seeking a helping hand with some of the heavy lifting needed to be done, and Nifty bringing him meals or any refreshments after his workout. And in some occasions visits from Kiki, the resident cat whose habits of wandering the hotel would see her pay him a visit from time to time. Mostly just to watch him work out or just use one of the workout stations to sleep on. He used these opportunities to get to know them better whenever they paid him a visit. The majority of the conversations he had with them helped to greatly learn more of themselves. It really aided in building a good standing with them as they learned more about him and him about them in return. Learning more about the reasons behind Charlie's goal of creating a sanctuary for sinners was very admiralty for the ninja, as he could relate to the princess's plight in having her dream repeatedly ridiculed by others. Even with the critics, Charlie still would not back down on her dream and instead choose to take a risk in opening the hotel. What other aspects of his life that he could infer from their talks was that Charlie truly loved her parents, even if they weren't fully in the picture when it came to her goal of and their daughter's goal of redeeming Hell's residents. A fact that he would come to learn in further talks with Vaggie about. Despite their less than favorable meeting with each other at first, he and Vaggie's relation greatly improved during the work he helped her with. Much of which entitled the blonde in helping Vagatha move furniture, refurbishing the guest rooms, replacing old wallpaper, and other chores to help accommodate future company. It surprised Naruto how much still had to be done in order to have full functionality at the inn, though he was further shocked by Vaggie's comments on how it was much worse off when she and Charlie arrived to turn the place around. In her own words, it was a complete shithole. At first, she was skeptical about the two of them being able to fix such a rundown building, even more since they did not have the supportful from her girlfriend's parents. Mostly due to the fact that her father, Lucifer, hadn't been seen for the past 7 years in hell. Apparently, the split between him and Charlie's mother Lilith had greatly affected him, and ever since then he's been locked up in his tower to cope with the depression. The fact that he could understand as the falling out with a loved one could greatly affect anyone, even if that person was the ruler of all demonkind. But that still didn't take away the fact that he hadn't been there to help his own daughter out with her idea on helping sinners get better. 7 years in isolation was too much time, even for someone with a broken heart to stay out of the life of a family member. It was a complete loss of time to make up, regardless of how long of life they came to have. This meant that the majority of the expenses had to be paid by Charlie, which wasn't hard to do given she was part of the royal family and could afford a multitude of needs if they called for it. Though at times money could only get you as far as there are just things that money could not buy you. In this case, having a good enough reputation and credibility for the rest of the denizens of the Pride Ring to want to be redeemed by them. Unfortunately, the means of having a positive exposure to the populace on advertising the hotel ended in utter disaster, as the interview they booked as their first major attempt to get the word concluded with Charlie getting into blows with a lead anchor woman and the other one up in flames. But how Vaggie put it as, the bitch made it hard not to punch her. So, now they were left back to square one on how to build a good rapport with the Happy Hotel. Correction, the Has-Been Hotel. A name that Alastor conjured up himself without any input from any of them. It wasn't until the morning after did they find out that the sign outside was changed by the radio demon. It took both Charlie and himself to restrain her from jumping the overlord with her spear. It was quite the morning to be had that day. When the topic shifted to that of Charlie's mother, all Vaggie had to say about that was that during the 3 years since she's been with Charlie, no once had she ever seen or spoken to Lilith. Mostly on the account that no one has been able to find her as not that long after the divorce. Lilith just point-blank disappeared from the face of hell. No one, not even Lucifer or Charlie, could make tales where she left. So, the only evidence of what she looked like was primarily from that of the family pictures that were spread throughout the layout of the building. It was a complete mystery, and one that affected Charlie greatly, as not only were her parents separated, but her father was no help in his self-isolation, and her mother was a no-show. Leading Charlotte to pretty much be without the aid of both her parents. This really rubbed Naruto the wrong way, as he knew full well from experience what it felt not having the support and love from both parents. Though granted, they were dead by the time he was born and was not able to meet them until he was a teenager, and they were spirits. He knew that they loved him dearly to the point of sacrificing themselves to save him from getting killed by a brainwashed Kurama. That still didn't take away the fact that both Charlie's parents were not here to help their daughter with the daunting task of changing the very notion of damnation through salvation. And even with the fact that Charlie was well over 200 years old and older than everybody at the hotel combined, she still needed all the help she could get to make her dream a reality. It made him respect her even more with how much weight she was carrying on her shoulders. The good thing is that she wasn't alone in this endeavor. Now that she had Vaggie, himself, and to an extent everyone else at the hotel. Even if the help provided wasn't always ideal, it was at very least better than nothing. His time spent with Vaggie helped to lessen any sort of unease that she felt towards him at the beginning, and felt that he could be someone to rely on if there ever came a time that they needed his help in case of emergencies. It was a good start to a good relationship that started off on a very rocky one, but was very glad that he was able to get her to get past her skepticism of him. What he came to learn about Vaggie wasn't as groundbreaking as what he was able to learn from Charlie, as Vagatha was careful enough not to let out anything too personal that she wanted to reveal to the newcomer. Which he understood, as he wasn't gonna demand to have her tell him every little thing about her life. What he could infer from Vaggie in either their talks or that of the ones had with Charlie was how she was someone to be trusted and a very dependable person to have on your side if he ever called for it. Though at times even he himself had some doubt on some of the things Vaggie had told him about herself. Not that he wanted to doubt her on anything or outright called her out on something that he felt wasn't entirely true about Vaggie's character, but mostly on the grounds that at times he could feel that she wasn't always 100% in the things she shared. Almost as if she was keeping things under wraps within a very thick shell. He could feel the type of emotions held in her, but decided not to question Vagatha about it. Only until she herself was ready to talk about with the rest of them, or if God forbid something were to happen that forced her to come with it. Hopefully, that wouldn't be the case. But other than that, he himself was confident in trusting Vaggie as someone to depend on at the hotel. It was a fact that he was comfortable given that he couldn't really say the same thing about the dot. Finally, there came Nifty. Not much had to be said about the fiery Riti to have a good measure of her character, as the briefest of moments spent with the maid could tell you everything you needed to know about what type of person she was. Out of the trio that he associated with, Nifty took a bulk of the time, as they would talk with each other on a regular basis. Most of the talks happened during his time working out, helping her prepare some of the meals, or just adding a few extra hands in keeping the establishment clean. The moment he unveiled his shadow clones once he had some chakra to spare was quite a shock to everyone. Even more so to the resident porn star who conjured up so many ideas on how to use his clones. To say that his comments did not elicit a response among the females would have been greatly understated. Though he did take note of how Nifty reacted to the idea of having multiple copies of him roaming around the hotel. It didn't take a genius to figure out what type of thoughts were coursing through her head right at that moment. Thankfully the time spent with Jiraiya helped to make him a bit less tense when it came to the opposite sex, though it still did not help the blonde cope with having to deal with far more promiscuous characters. It was sometimes so thick you could practically taste it in the air. While he enjoyed his time with Nifty, he was surprised at how the small maid took a bit of a liking to the sage too quickly, to the point of being quite pressed in making sure that he had everything that he needed. Not wanting to be pampered or wanting her to overwork herself as a means of pleasing him, Naruto on many occasions told Nifty of being self-sufficient in his lifestyle and instead of waiting for her just to leave him to his own devices when it came to taking care of personal matters. At first, she was adamant about offering her assistance to the blonde as she found it to be the most rewarding experience of helping those in need, even if it meant her services were not being needed. It troubled Naruto to a certain degree in how trusting Nifty could be, as she seemed like the kind of person who would be taken advantage of. Fortunately, he was able to talk her down and not fretting too much on him, and it pained him to see her have a downtrodden face at the idea of not giving hand, but soon relented if it meant making him comfortable. Their budding friendship still remained strong and continued to grow. Though he could never shake the feeling of an ever-present eye watching him when alone in the gym or during the shower. On occasions, he had to ask Charlie for more boxers as they kept disappearing from the laundry. He wished he could say the same about Alastor and Husk, but given that both men heavily contrasted with each other in how they contact themselves, it only made sense that the blonde would have a very difficult time being in their company. Husk was by no means a bad person, foul-mouthed, but not bad. The few times he managed to talk with the alcoholic cat could be described in layman terms as being both awkward and unproductive in the times he was able to converse with the gambler. The most he got from those discussions was mostly a combination of drunken nonsense or irritation of being put in charge of manning the bar by the Red Overlord. It was clearly made evident that the relationship Husk had with Alastor was purely based on the grounds of repaying a debt. What said debt was in itself a complete mystery. A mystery that Sage hoped to learn more about once he was on better terms with the resident barkeeper. The one takeaway lesson that he did learn through his sparse talks with Husker was that he was never one to mince his words on what he truly thought about people in general. To which none of the rest of the hotel's inhabitants were spared from his unfiltered opinion of them. Be it Charlie's endless cheery disposition in life, despite living in hell. And her goal of purifying the souls of sinners' wishes quickly grew to be irksome. Vaggie's shrewd personality and times were unbearable in the tasks that she assigned to everyone, though the jobs themselves were out of necessity for the well-being of the hotel. If his problem with Charlie's personality was to be desired, then his issue with the ever-loving maid was intensified tenfold, given her cheerful persona. To the best of the blonde's knowledge, he was the only one to be at least tolerated by the card dealer, but that was not saying much. Angel on the other hand was an entirely different matter altogether. For obvious reasons. The mere thought of the male gigolo made it hard from keeping down a blush from forming. His interactions with Angel, to say the least, had been very colorful in comparison to the rest. He could still vividly recall his encounter with the spider during his early recovery phase. 2 weeks after his arrival. Having recovered quite nicely during these past 2 weeks and with no means of returning home anytime soon, he chose to help around the hotel by doing odd jobs. This mostly stems from a means of contributing back to the care he was giving, as well as doing something productive instead of nothing. The first such job given to him by Vaggie was to retrieve Angel from his room and make sure he was in time for his daily sessions with her and Charlie for counseling up on the 7th floor. His time spent with the spider may not have been the longest, with only a few meetings here and there as Angel always left the building at odd hours. What he did was not clear to Naruto, and when he asked Charlie what Angel did to leave at such hours, her only reply was very vague, as if she didn't want him to worry too much about what the spider did on his own time. The same response was also given by Vaggie, who chose to not divulge any info about Angel either. The blonde just chalked it up as being protective of their client's personal affairs. He decided not to pry too much afterward. Okay, currently walking down the hallway of the 4th floor looking at the numbered signs. Angel's room has to be number 412. With a quick turn to his left, he was able to spot the number he was looking for. Here it is. I guess I didn't have to be told that this was Angel's room by just the number alone, he told himself as he looked at the graffiti-covered door, which looked as if it were covered in all sorts of markings of crudely drawn symbols and stains adorning much of the wooden frame. He proceeded to lightly tap on the door a few times, but was met with silence. Knocking once more with a bit of force to his knuckles, silence still greeted him. His third attempt would have been the loudest if it weren't interrupted by the forcible way the door was swung open. What lay in front of the ninja was that of a half-naked angel covered in a very loose kimono that barely shielded his body and seemed to be on the verge of slipping from his shoulders if he moved too any further. "What?" he yelled, visibly angry at having been woken up. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "Midday." Though having momentarily lost his sudden anger on realizing that half the day was already over. "Well, it's still too damn early. Not that I don't mind seeing you, but what brings you here in front of my doorstep?" he said, while resting his body on the side of the doorframe looking at the human with a puzzled stare, still not minding being practically naked in front of the blonde. Something that Naruto had difficulty with keeping eye contact with the spider without averting his gaze to somewhere else. "Vaggie told me to fetch you because you're running late on your counseling." A silent pause. "Oh, that's," snapping his fingers at the reminder of having forgotten again his sessions with the Dyke duo. "I thought I was forgetting something," he told himself while looking up towards the ceiling as if in deep thought. "Can't you just tell them if we can postpone this for tomorrow? I kinda had myself a long night." "Sorry, but Vaggie was dead set on you attending the meeting as she's becoming fed up that you keep on missing dates," putting an emphasis on dead set as she was very adamant on the drug addict showing up even if it meant having to drag by force. Heading back to his room without a second thought, leaving the door open behind him. "Fine, I'll go, just give me a sec to get ready." "Alright, I'll just wait for you here out in the hallway." "Come on, don't be such a stranger standing by yourself," waving one of his arms at him. "Why don't you keep me company while I'm getting ready? I don't want to be a distraction." "You won't, just get your ass in here." "If it's fine by you, then I guess it is no problem then." With that said, the blonde entered the gangster's apartment and closed the door behind him. The side of the interior of the room looked to have seen better days, as the once clean headroom had turned into a mess-filled collage made of either plate with half-eaten meals, empty booze bottles, or cigarette butts on a green-stained ashtray. Other items that littered the floor seemed to be more personal items that consisted of loose clothing, socks, underwear, and black-laced boots. Over to the wall where a three-way mirror was located was the setup of countless glass jars of makeup, eyeliners, hanging jewelry, and a few different colored wings lined at the far end of the counter. Another sight that he found was that of a small bed placed near the main bed that had two sets of bowls in front of it. Both were half-filled with either water or pellet drops. He must have a pet, he contemplated, but couldn't spot one out as the heavy odor of perfume and alcohol engulfed the entirety of the room. Some of the more risque objects were that of fur-covered handcuffs, mouth gaggers, short and beat beats, and a multitude of different sized dildos. Of course he would have those, he thought with a small blush beginning to form as he spotted some white stains at the end of some of the sex toys. It didn't help his heightened senses from smelling their scent from where he was standing. The smell was one that he wasn't accustomed to, as well as one that he had ever known from the brothels that his old master had made him go to during his years training with him. The smell was really taking him to those moments. It only served to make his face lit up the memory of all the different encounters had during his time in those places. Kinda almost made him miss them. "Looking at something you like?" He looked upwards to catch the smirking face of Angel, who looked at him over the thinly veiled clothing sheet. One of which helped to center on the outline of his body over the papered wall. "Anything got your interest? Because I don't mind sharing anything if you let me join in." "No. I was just admiring the view of the too flustered to come up with the right words to say. Of your room." "Yeah, your room is pretty cozy and well put together." "Well put?" "Yeah." The very awkward silence soon enveloped the conversation. "I'll just wait outside." Before he could move a single step to avoid making this even more uncomfortable, he was stopped by Angel's voice. "Wait. You don't have to go, I was just having some fun with you." Stepping away from the cover wall with his usual getup and made his way to his bed to put on his boots. "Look, I wasn't trying to be mean, it's just that I have a habit of putting my foot in my mouth with the things that I say." "Yeah," waving his left hand in the air. "Is no big deal. It's just that I am not used to this type of attention." "If you say so." "So, do you have a dog or cat with you?" Quickly changing the subject to avoid any further dead air between the two of them. "Nah, even better than that," standing up from his bed once he was done putting on his footwear. "Here, sweetie, come to daddy," lightly tapping the bottom side of the sofa with his boot. The noise that came from under the mattress seemed to indicate movement from underneath and only getting louder as it got closer to the edge. From the pitch darkness came that faint glow of two red pinkish dots emitting eerily. What in the world could that be? Unsure of how to react to the strange noise emitting from the bedding. His thoughts were soon interrupted by what came forward and the loud squeal erupted from Angel. What came from the depths of the bed was that of a small sharp-toothed piglet whose snout was covered with the specks of dust bunnies from scavenging carpeted floor. Oink. Oh, there you are my little nuggie. Picking up the small pig with his lower set arms and putting him in a loving embrace. Well, wasn't expecting that as anticlimactic as that was, he couldn't help but smile at how Angel was reacting to the animal as opposed to how he would usually react to others. The sight was quite nice to see such a loving display. I'd like to introduce to you Fat Nuggets, putting the pig in front of his face to showcase how cute it was. Fat Nuggets. Cute name, don't you think? Boink. Looking at the creature close to its face, he could very well say that the pig was the most normal animal he has laid his eyes on since his arrival. The rest of the wildlife he has seen were far from normal, as ranged from one-eye flying bats to murderous sharpened-teeth crows. Nuggets, though normal, still retained some of the odder features to graze it. It had a triangle curved shaped tail, black small spikes trailing its back, and 4 black spots on its sides that had a faint glimmer when hit by dark light. Is its eyes glowing? Leaning a bit closer to see the dark spots begin to flicker as Nugget squirmed to its sides under Angel's grip. Pretty cool, huh, he said while gently stroking the top of Nugget's head, who in turn purred in content. He's been able to do that ever since I found him wandering by himself in the outskirts of town. What were you doing all that way over there? I was just doing a team exercise with some of my coworkers. My boss wanted us to partake in a bit of a nature retreat. He said with a bit of reservation in his voice. And that's where I ended up meeting this little cutie. Really? Yep, one of the best things to ever happen to me since that moment I got here, nuzzling the animal even more by the end of the sentence. Naruto smiled at the display of emotions as it told him a whole lot about the type of person Angel was. Maybe he wasn't as bad as he was made out to be by Vaggie. Though he did hold back to comment on Angel's tone when he talked about his work. Probably a sensitive subject. His eyes also glow too. Helps to serve as my own personal nightlight, he added while placing the creature on the ground. Nuggets on his part did not shy away from getting closer to the blonde's leg and started to rub against his leg affectionately. Something that surprised Angel by the looks of it. Holy crap, he's taken quite the shine to you, a bit dumbfounded in Nuggets acting friendly to someone other than himself. Is that really that surprising? He asked as he crouched down to pet the pig on its back, resulting in an even more happyish purring. I don't see why he wouldn't be friendly to others. Because he isn't, Angel replied as he lowered himself to the same level as Naruto. Since the moment I adopted him, he has never shown any interest in other people, not even to my best friend Cherry, hell not even Charlie. So, I'm the first, huh? Pretty much, yeah. How the hell did you even manage to do that anyway? For as long as I could remember, animals always seemed to have an affinity towards me. I just attribute it to my chakra having a sort of resonance in calming their instincts. No shit. Charlie is gonna be very pissed when she finds out that Nuggets likes you more than her. Speaking of Charlie, they're still waiting for you to show up. He reminded the spider as he was on the clock to bring him in. The longer we keep them waiting, the more aggravated Vaggie is gonna get with each passing second. Man, that chick has a stick so far up her ass, I'll end up coming out the front one of these days, he stated as he took a cig out his breast pocket with the intent of lighting one up, only to have it plugged from his lips from said resident sage. Hey. No smoking. Charlie was very adamant of you in not ingesting any narcotics, and by the looks of your room, you haven't kept your end of the bargain. Now you promised her that you would try to get better, and that won't work if you keep doing this behind her back. Oh come on, not you too, tossing his head to the side at the type of reaction being leveled at him. So I smoke a few snubs and drink a bit of hooch, that doesn't mean I am off the wagon. I only use it to take the edge off from time to time, nothing else. His only response from the ninja was that of a long silent stare aimed at him. Hey now, stop with th. You promised. Now don't start with the kitty stuff, promises are a dime of a dozen that most never owned up to. Not to me, Angel. Never to me, voice filled with the conviction to back up those words. Seeing that his attempt to knock some sense into his thick skull was met with failure. All Angel could do was drop his head and sigh in defeat. Fine, you win. I'll go to the stupid meeting, Angel replied, though in a flash he grabbed onto Fat Nuggets and hugged close to his fluffy chest. But I am taking Nugs here too, with how riled up you got me, I need all the stress reliever I can get. If Charlie is okay with her cat roaming around the place, then it won't be much of an issue bringing mine to the meeting. The two promptly exited the spider's room with the latter locking up his room behind him. Now all three were now ready to head out, but before the shinobi could take a step forward, he felt his right arm being grabbed and placed under one of Angel's own. He stared in surprise at the sudden move. "Don't start. If I have to go then, the least you could do is escort me there. Ain't that right, Nugs?" Oink. Fine by me, while smiling and getting Angel to budge. Well, let's not keep them waiting any longer. It wasn't long after his encounter with Angel that he became a regular attendee in his scheduled sessions, leading to Naruto becoming a bit more acquainted with the recovering drug addict. His presence helped with Angel's meetings with Charlie and Vaggie greatly as it aided him in being more comfortable in opening up about himself. Though it did not mean that Angel gave up the habit of ingesting drugs, it helped at the very least in calming down his urges. Slow process, but a process nonetheless. When not busy with chores, he was mostly found hanging out with Angel on either the recreation floor or in his room. Albeit after making sure that it got a thorough cleaning and part of a combined effort of him, Angel, and Nifty. All in all, it was quite the experience having to rummage all over Angel's room, as some of the things that they found left the blonde red-faced and the maid panting like a dog in heat. Deep in thoughts of someone close and dear. The unmistakable voice of a red deer spruced up behind him. Christ, Alastor. Startled by the overlord who always manages to get one over him. Something that was a rarity to him of all people giving his excellent honing skills. Can you please stop doing? You're gonna end giving someone a heart attack one of these days. Don't fret too much about such a concept, we sinners are more resilient than you give us credit for. A minor spook would have no such effect on anyone down here. Still though, putting a hand on his chest to calm down his racing heart. No one likes being sneaked upon. Haven't heard any complaints from anyone yet. Probably too scared to even say it, he uttered under his breath. Anyways, what brings you here standing all by your lonesome self, standing a tad too close to the blonde as he once more failed to head people's personal space. Just waiting for Vaggie to show up so I can help her with some of the supplies that she, Razzle, and Dazzle went out to fetch to restock the kitchen. Charlie opted out and not joining her. Charlie was too busy in coming up with new methods of rehabilitation, so she's kinds locked up in her room with the meantime. Oh, that sweet misguided girl, placing his gloved hand on his chest as if he were mourning. When will she realize that her venture will bear no fruit? There's never been any such case of a corrupted soul sent to hell ever stepping beyond the pearly gates of heaven. Have you ever seen a sinner be redeemed? Not in all of my centuries here stay in this dastardly inferno. Then is still possible for it to happen. Excuse me? Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it is not impossible for it to occur. The response itself left the overlord quite over the response given to him by the human, and whose eyes glowed briefly for a second, as if he was processing the information. As brief as his perplexity came, that it quite left soon replaced with a sharp-toothed smile stretching all across his face. If being nice was all it took, then hell would be a very empty place. I doubt Charlie would have it takes to make it possible. We won't know unless we wait to see what Charlie has in mind. I'll never work. Then, why stay here if you don't support her goal? What other reason do you have in being here at the hotel at all? Leaning close to the blonde's face even more so than he already was, to the point of having the radio demon's eyes illuminate his own. For entertainment. Unfazed by the direct Candace, he just leveled a stare of his own at him. The silence was deafening as both men stood on their grounds without flinching or backing down. It's a fool's dream. Then I guess that makes me one too. No other words were spoken as the noise of the front doors of the entrance were quickly opened, revealing the forms of Vaggie and the two short red goats carrying an assortment of grocery bags. Sorry about keeping you waiting too long, traffic was a lot more hectic than I thought. I'll be. Her smile aimed at him soon turned to that of a frown as she saw who was standing close to him. Alastor. Greetings Vagatha and fellow help. I presume those bags are meant for the kitchen. Yeah, there are, she replied slowly as stood her distance wary of the deer. Same was applied to Razzle and Dazzle as both chose not to stick around too long around the overlord and decided instead to quickly scamper off to the kitchen to deliver the fresh produce. Looking to see that both of them were standing awfully close to each other, she noted a sort of tension between and couldn't help put two together. You're not starting any trouble, are you, Alastor? Heavens no. Fainting surprise. Why would I ever do such a thing? I agreed to commit no such violence in these here premises. Proceeding to put his arm around the shoulder of Naruto and bring him in a tight embrace. All that I am doing is having a friendly discussion here with my good pal. Vaggie carefully looked at the radio demon with a calculated gaze to call his claim, but knew that would be a waste of time given who she was referring to. Is he telling the truth, Naruto? He's right. There's no problem here getting out the overlord's hug and walking to where Vaggie was. We were just talking to pass the time. About what? You know, guy stuff. Guy stuff. Really rolling her eyes at such a blatant response. You can just say that you don't want to tell me. That obvious? Very. She once again turned her attention back to Alastor. I may not know what you two were talking about, and quite frankly I may not want to, but for the love God, Alastor, don't try to stir any unwanted commotion for anyone else. The last thing we need here is having to worry about what you may do. On the contrary, my dear Vaggie, all that I wish to do is be of service to our humble landlord and make sure that our ambitions are thoroughly met with the utmost satisfaction, placing a hand on his heart. Scout's honor, ending it with his trademark grin. Bright still did not believe a single word that he just said. But knew better in getting into an argument with such a dangerous overlord. Besides, she still needed to finish stocking up the pantry. Naruto, let's get the rest of the food from the car before it starts to spoil. Sure thing. Almost halfway through the front doors of the entrance did Vaggie stop to call out the attention of Alastor once more to deliver one last remark. And don't call me Vaggie. It's Vaggie. Perish the thought. A name such as that is too cross for me to speak out loud. Smartest was the last word Vaggie said to the radio demon as she and Naruto exited the building. Leaving said demon by himself, lost in his world, deeply entrenched into the very existence of the blonde warrior. Clean, did he do anything to make you uncomfortable or threatened? She said with dead seriousness in her voice. Just say the word and I'll ask Charlie to call off this deal she made with him. You don't have to do that. We were just talking, nothing more and nothing else. Still though, Alastor poses an unknown danger to the rest of us. Trust me, I feel the same way you do, but right now he's all talk. The second he tries anything bad, I'll make sure to put a stop to whatever he has planned. Just make sure not to let your guard down whenever he's near. Looking briefly back, he wondered if they were being watched by the Crimson Overlord. You don't have to worry about that happening. I trust him as far as I can throw him, and let me tell you, I'll be hard to take him out once he sends hurling as far away from here. Snort. Hearing her snort made him crack a smile of his own, as the tension both felt when talking about Alastor lessened at the thought of the Overlord being sent flying. Was it something I said? Just picturing that red-headed prick sent packing over the horizon. Yeah, I guess that would be pretty funny. Both feel a whole lot chipper and focus on the task at hand, instead of having a debate over the choice to worry over their affable associate. After his tense encounter with Alastor and a long day of doing an array of tasks, all Naruto wanted to do was head back to his room to crash down on his bed to pass out in a deep slumber. Walking up the flights of stairs seemed to have become a sort of ritual for the blonde, as it was both not that long of a walk to his room and neither too short for his tastes. Thankfully his room was located on the 4th floor. Oddly enough, it was the same floor that both he and Angel shared. The rest of the hotel's guests stayed at different levels of the building. Given that both Charlie and Vaggie were in a relationship with each other, it was understandable for them to share a bed together. Theirs was of course the penthouse suite up on the 6th, which made sense given that Charlie owned the hotel. Husk and Nifty stayed in their own enclosed lodging within the servants' quarters located on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor was to be the location of Alastor's room. The reason for choosing the floor above the lobby was to be close to the entrance. Though given his ability to pop out of nowhere at any given moment, it was fair to say that traveling distance was not much of an issue when it came to the radio demon. Even with the immense rooms still available, numbering below 350 rooms, the building did not feel as empty as it should be. He attributed this feeling to how lively his neighbors were, that helped to fill in that vacant space. Man, what a day, he quietly said as he finally turned to the corner of the hall where his room was. But what he did not expect to see pacing around sitting on the carpeted floor leading to his doorway being that of Nuggets. It didn't take long for the pig to sense the blonde out and skirp. Oink. 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 What's wrong? Why are you all by yourself? He told the small animal as he bent down a bit to see what was going on. Nuggets responded back by pawing at Naruto's leg. Why aren't you with Angel? Hearing the name of his owner seemed to signal the piglet to begin walking away. Seeing the response Nugget gave when hearing Angel's name helped him to narrow down what the issue may be about. Are you taking me to Angel? That seemed to be the right answer as Nugget suddenly sprinted towards Angie's room at a rapid speed. Not wanting to wait a second longer, he followed suit on the pig's tail. Thankfully the travel to his room wasn't far from his own, though his curiosity started to take form in the pit of his stomach and increased tenfold once he reached the spider's door that was slightly left ajar. It didn't take a genius to figure out how Nugget was able to get out, given its small stature. The moment he rushed in, the sight that greeted him was that of Angel, who seemed to have passed out with his back laying against the post of the bed. The shape he was in left much to be desired as his casual attire looked as if it were put through the ringer, as it was covered in tears, creases, folds, and dark stains trailing downwards of his dress shirt. His boots were thrown haphazardly to the side as if they were the only pieces of clothing that he could remove before collapsing onto the floor. The short skirt he wore also took a bit of the blunt damage, as it also had its fair share of tears, alongside that of white color marks found around the rim of the clothing. All in all, not a sight that would be considered remotely pretty. Quickly kneeling down beside him, he had to stop himself from reeling back on the strong odor that emitted from his body as the stench of nicotine and alcohol assaulted his nostrils. The smell was the least of his worries, as he was also able to point out bruise marks running alongside both upper arms and small cuts scattered on the lower set. Luckily they did not seem to be deep enough to cause any serious blood loss. "Angel?" he called out while checking to see that he was breathing properly by placing a hand on the side of his neck to scan for a beat. It was faint but stable. "Come on, Angel, you got to open your eyes," lightly tapping his palm against his friend's face a couple of times. This still proved to be insufficient as he was still met with no response. "Let me get the first aid from the bathroom," springing to his feet and quickly headed into the lavatory and opened up the medicine cabinet to grab the red-colored kit from its container. Quickly settling once more next to Angel as he began to apply relief to some of the open wounds after unbuttoning his shirt. The action itself proved to be enough stimuli for the spider as he began to feel the coolness of the ointment applied to his wounds rouse him from his semi-unconsciousness. Struggling to open his main eyes, Angel had to resort to using his lower set specs under his main ones, but even with the extra pair of eyes, he could barely make the figure of Naruto as his line of sight swayed between pitch darkness and blurriness. And to his voice was barely a whisper as even the act of speaking took a toll on his throat. Thankfully, it was loud enough for the blonde to make out as he continued to apply medical care throughout the gangster's body. "My god, Angel, what happened to you? Can't talk mew. Ch rig. Htn.ow. Trying to move his head forward in a vain attempt to get up, but hardly had the strength to even lift his head up and instead had to rely on the shinobi's hand on the back of his head to support its weight. Her. Tst.otal. K. Seeing that Angel was too hurt to even form words, Naruto needed to call the others for help. "Don't try to speak to Angel, I am gonna send out a couple of clones to get Charlie or Nifty to give me a hand." His attempt to spring out his shadow clones was halted in his tracks as he felt a hand grip his left fist. "Angel? No, I'd on. Twa. Ntn. Yonlc now. You can't be serious. Angel, your body is covered in cuts and bruises." Place. He's now looking at with both eyes opened, or at the very least trying to as they struggled to heed to the command of staying on guard. M. Hein, he reluctantly said as he knew that Angel would not waver at the prospect of having the others know the type of state he was in. "But I am gonna have to move you onto the bed. I can't do much with you laying on the ground." Angel, thankful for his compliance, nodded back at the request but knew that it would hurt more than it did to move his head. "Okay, here we go," Naruto said through a low whisper as he took Angel in his arms by hooking his arms underneath his back and legs. His movements were to be as gentle as possible as the damage sustained made Angie let out a muddled groan. "Ngh. I know it hurts, but just bear with me for just a bit more," he told him as he slowly lowered him on the bed. Afterward, to keep with the privacy he was asked to hold, he quickly locked the front door shut. "There, at least we don't have to worry about any uninvited guests." Turning his attention back to his friend, he set out to administer the best medical care he could provide at the given moment. "Hope I don't come to regret keeping this a secret from Charlie." 3 hours later past midnight. Though he wouldn't ever claim to be an expert medical practitioner, Naruto's sufficient knowledge in patching up bodies warranted thanks to both Tsunade and Sakura for teaching him the main principles of healing. The patchwork he did for Angel was enough to keep him both stable and breathing right. Much of the damage that he worked on ended below the neck, with much of the injuries hailing from the frontal area. Mostly on the chest and stomach. This was intentional, whoever did this to Angel only damaged the areas that could be covered up by his clothing, he thought angrily on the offshoot of someone committing such a violent act. Looking at the shape Angel was in made him even angrier, but at the same time sad that something like this would happen. His current helper in providing a soothing conform came from Nuggets, who nestled onto his sleeping owner's side as he whimpered sadly on Angel being harmed in such a way. "Boink. I know, buddy, I know," he said as he slowly rubbed his back with the side of his wrist. "But right now all we can do is wait for Angel's body to recover. So try not to fret too much." Checking the cloak, he noticed how late it was. Past 2 already too tired of staying awake as the previous day's activities on top of helping Angel made him even more exhausted. Not wanting to leave Angel by himself, he opted instead to stay in his room to monitor for any changes. Propping himself on the chair next to the bed and using the spare pillow in the room, Naruto closed his eyes with the hopes of his friend feeling better by the time he woke up. Here's hoping that everything turns out alright by morning. Morning 8:45 a.m. The morning after could only be described as murder for Angel as he woke up with the foulest feeling that he has felt in a very long time. Feeling a warm body next to him, he looked down to see his beloved pig snoring away at his sides without a care in the world, with only the occasional twitch of his sleeping prone, signaling any movement. Oh, Nugs lifting his bandaged arm to caress its head with the back of his hand. This prompted him to notice the dressing surrounding the left side of his arms. He noticed the same on the other, as well as the bindings on his chest and midsection. Took that many to patch me up. I look as if I belong at a hospice. With what I had to work with, I would have recommended you stay in one. The voice surprising Angel has looked to his right to spot the blonde sitting on the armchair, rubbing the tiredness from his eyes. But I think it all turned out fine. Though I won't be privy the next time something like this happens. Hopefully it doesn't either. How would I ever charm myself into your pants if my good looks get sullied, laughing at the prospect of teasing the shinobi, but quit it as he noticed the stern expression being given to him. What? Are we just gonna ignore the elephant in the room, or are we gonna talk about last night? Which would that be, the made-up one or the one in your pants? Angel stressing his name out as he is locked into the spider's heterochromatic eyes. This is no joking matter. Someone did this to you on purpose, and I just want to know who did this and why. Honey, this is hell if you have forgotten already. Most living here don't have a reason for the things they do. Heck, plenty just do it for shits and giggles. Not your wounds. Yours were done on purpose, as if someone wanted to send a message. Don't you think that's a bit of a stretch? Not bothering and keeping eye contact, but instead fidgeting with the bottle of painkillers he grabbed from the dashboard. Then what happened? I was attacked while walking home from work. Took a shortcut through an alleyway and got jumped by a couple of goons that gave me a thrashing and then went on their merry way. Can you imagine the reason they decided to attack you? Who knows? Shrugging his shoulders. Maybe they thought I was easy pickings and wanted to pull one over me. Did they take anything? Not really. Much of what I had on me was just a few slips of paper and some loose change. Nothing to write home about. Now that I think about it, maybe that's the reason why they went after me. Can't blame them. When you look this good, many would assume you're carrying something on ya. Right now, sporting an even more dubious look. I wish I could believe in you, Angel, but you're not telling me the whole truth. Really? What part in me being beaten up can't you believe in? Gesturing at the state he was in. Because I really like having to be bedridden after getting 10 shades of blue to be kicked once in a while just for the fun of it. Look, I am not trying to downplay your incident, but you're still a victim of a crime now, sitting on the edge of the bed. All I want is to help you. I am not. Lifting himself up with a bit of struggle. All that happened was just a run-of-mill incident. Your injuries say otherwise. Oh, for beep's sakes. Pray to tell on you can figure out how my wounds differ from what I just told you. Well, for starters, talking in a small breath for the speech he was about to give. The marks on your body are clearly cigarette burns pressed down on the skin. The red welches on your stomach are from repeated trauma from fists, which are very apparent given the hand-shaped prints on them. Your throat has a clear outline that can only be done if someone had a tight grip around it, and by how it's entered, it only could be done if said person was standing up with you kneeling down, now looking at Angel straight in the eyes. All of which points towards a single individual in committing this type of damage. Am I right, Angel? I'm here if you want to talk about it. There's nothing wrong with opening up about what happened. You did nothing wrong, so please tell me what really went down. Placing a hand on Angel's shoulder and giving it a soft squeeze. I just want to help you. How can you expect to help me when you barely know anything about me? We barely even know each other longer than a month. Looking into Naruto's eyes, gauging to see if he was that willing to help him. But the truth. Fine, you win. On the condition that you bring me some breakfast, because I can't be expected to open up on an empty stomach. So you don't mind, can you bring me and Nug some grub? Fine. Smiling on the returning spunk of Angel, I'll see if I can spruce up some plates from the kitchen. I imagine that Nifty is already at work getting breakfast ready alongside Charlie and Vaggie getting up from bed and heading towards the door. See if you can also bring me some more painkillers, my head is starting to develop a tad headache. I'll bring you water instead, need you to be clear-headed. With that said, he soon exited the room, leaving Angel and his pet alone. Seeing that Nugs was snuggling closer to his sides again, Angel could only contemplate what he was going to say once the blonde returned. What am I going to do now, Nugs? Boink. Yeah, I think so too, rubbing the black spot on the side of its stomach. A whole heap of trouble. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.